All right. So I'm here tonight with my resident, what's the word for Star Wars fans?
There's no like Trekker
Right.
version.
That's
I
weird,
think it's
huh?
just yeah, and it's like one of those things. Are they a Star Wars geek, nerd, or dork? I
Huh.
guess it depends on social skill.
What would you consider yourself?
I think Star Wars fan.
Okay. Resident Star Wars fan, Ryan. Sitting with me to talk today about the new Disney Plus show, The Book of Boba Fett, Chapter 1. Well, I guess he was kind of introduced in the previous show, The Mandalorian, that he was kind of teased.
That was his most recent appearance, and it was a little bit more than a tease because he was in like I think 3 or 4 episodes in no small part at the end of season 1 of Mandalorian. At some, I don't know if it was the end, but it was the first episode where Fennec was introduced on Tatooine.
Yeah.
And there's this like last shot off to the side where it's like, who's looking in the shadows? Oh shit, it's fucking Boba Fett, which, I mean, unless you paid attention in the prequel movies, you're like, oh, that is the guy that they cloned all the clone troopers was. It's the same actor. So it's like, well, that has to be, that's freaking Boba Fett. So a lot of fans lost their minds and shit their pants when they saw that.
Because he did first tease him with that, the possibility of him showing up with his armor showing up first.
Yes.
Which is
because I think that was the start of sort of season 2 when he was on Tatooine. He's trying to track down the armor of Boba Fett.
Right.
But yeah, Boba's. I don't want to talk to him like he's a drink. Mr. Fett. I had that just pop in my head the other day. Someone on his show like shooting him with little boba beads out of a straw. He's, as an archetype of a character, he is the very broad archetype of the mysterious badass. Right? So Darth Maul is in a similar category of the mysterious badass. Doesn't say a lot. It's implied the way the camera treats him is not even necessarily things like someone says, oh, he's a badass or a notorious bounty hunter. Just the way the camera treats him. It's like, oh, okay. He's throwing a vibe. He's throwing a vibe and he can back it up. And the interesting thing is sometimes you should keep it that way.
Right.
But the mystery of, well, who are they can just totally undercut, right? If you have a really great, and he's an antagonist, not necessarily a villain, but a lot of times where you have the mysterious villain and you try to then give them fill in the blanks backstory, pathos, right? All that sort of stuff. It can take away from that mystique. And I don't know. We're going to see whether or not that happens to Boba Fett. Like, I mean, if you look at what they did with Darth Maul after the Phantom Menace with Clone Wars and Rebels, Dave, oh God, I'm going to try and say his name right, Filoni, did an amazing job expanding out that character and not diminishing them in a really good way. And so that in the new continuity is what hopefully we're going to see with Boba Fett. Because in the old legacy stuff, one of my friends was sort of commenting the other day is like, they kind of have to do the legacy how did he survive, because it's the only way he survives is he blows his way out of the Sarlacc pit, right? And we do get that scene, but in the legacy books they had a whole bunch of Boba Fett books. I think I read at least 3 or 4 of them, and I just recall that he was the sort of grim, dark survivor, ruthless character. They did not give him a heart of gold, anything like that. He was a brutal, Spartan-esque survivor in a harsh underworld. And they stuck with that, and it worked. They did other stuff later. I think I brought up last time, they had the whole, what was it? The new threat to the galaxy, the Yokoshvong, which I'm mispronouncing, right? And they changed up the whole status quo. They did the death of Chewbacca and all other sort of stuff. And at one point, like, they're starting to seed in that Boba Fett is around, and he keeps showing up near Han Solo.
Mhm.
And so there's some bit where, they're evacuating a space station or something like that, and Han Solo's got his new non-human buddy, and they're, trying to defend some corridor or something at a junction, and they sort of back up into the junction, and they look like over their shoulder because there's more blaster fire, and there's Boba Fett and like 4 or 5 other Mandalorians that he's training up to sort of resurrect the Mandalorians. And they're not there to fight Han. They're also there fighting off the Yokoshvong, because basically they just did that version of the Mandalorians as the Klingons, where they just love battle.
Yeah.
And so, they kind of like looked over the shoulder at each other and was like, yeah, we're not fighting each other now. Boom, 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 and went back to fighting the threat. And all that stuff's out the window, and I don't miss it. They didn't really do the sort of more deep pathos sort of stuff that we saw, at least with Jin in The Mandalorian, Mando, right? The sort of backstory there, the more richer stuff that they did with the Clone Wars, where they introduced the Mandalorians, and within Rebels as well. So yeah, now they're gonna sketch in the blanks. It's like George Lucas did the first 3 movies, and if you're thinking of this as a page, he wrote dead center in the middle of the page, a little bit on the left, and that's the first movie. And then he jumped into the center and drew a little bit in the center of the page, and that's Return of the Empire. And then very far on the right side, that's Return of the Jedi. And that's all in like the middle fourth of the page. And we've been drawing stuff above and below and around that and filling in the gaps ever since. And this is one of those places to fill in the gaps. Like, Boba Fett is a giant sort of blank spot in the continuity. He did go in the prequels and give some backstory, gave his origin as part of the clone troopers, and a modified clone of his father. And they, did a little flashback to that at the very beginning of him holding his father's helmet after it got lopped off by Mace Windu.
Well, with the movies, this would be the first time it's been said that he survived the pit, right?
Yes, this is the first time that there's been any sort of acknowledgement that he survived. Mandalorian obviously was like, he's alive, but now
Right.
It's the how, which it's gonna kind of be, I expect. So let's just talk narrative structure of the first episode. It's a flashback, what's going on now, flashback, what's going on now setup. It's like, oh, we're going to have a slightly more coherent, very blatant, we're having a flashback structure. With here, they have the back to tank as the here's when you're going to have flashbacks, right?
I dug that.
Yeah, it made it more clear and not as confusing for people watching. And it's interesting because it seems like between where him and Fennec go bye-bye in Mandalorian, I think they even had a tease for the Book of Boba Fett, and it's him on Jabba's throne.
Yeah.
Like, that's kind of where we start things, in Jabba's palace, him in the back to tank. So there's a new status quo that we have to get caught up on, which
Right.
is going to be all the flashback stuff,
Mhm.
which is him surviving Sarlacc pit and blah, 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 up to, I'm guessing, Mando, and then after he left Mando. And that's all going to be back and forth with what's happening in the, quote, present, the I'm in Jabba's palace, I'm in charge, but now he's going to have to put his foot down. It's going to be interesting because there's always this, because this is basically a gangster show.
Right.
It's a gangster show, right? It's the Goodfellas of Star Wars.
Right.
Or Goodfella, singular. And there's this whole recurring thing in at least mobster movies of, I want respect. I want respect. And I'm like, no, motherfucker, you want people to fear you. And it's very odd because in his conversation with Fennec, she's telling him, you're being too nice. These people need to fucking fear you.
Right.
Because this is not, hi, I'm the new mayor in town, let's all get along. It's, I'm the boss and you're going to give me a cut of your business, whether you want to or not. That's what's happening, right? That is a mob boss. I get a cut of everything that you're doing.
Right.
Because otherwise, I come down on you like a ton of bricks.
Because he even did mention that when the mayor's representative came through and was kind of talking crazy about, you know, instead of him kind of giving his tribute, he's like, well, you know, I'm, you know, the mayor's expecting something. He's like, don't I supposed to be the crime lord? You know, it's almost saying like, you know, politicians are bigger crime lords than me.
Right. It was very odd because like he's saying to Fennec, like, I want to rule with respect. Like that, okay, that's interesting, but it's like that doesn't work. What feels like a naive understanding of how the underworld works. Like if a kid was writing the mob boss, I'd be like, no, I want respect. I treat you with respect. You treat me with respect. But you're going to give me 50% of your stuff. Like that doesn't work. At least in mafia lingo, when people say I want to be respected, they want to be feared. Like that seems more straightforward than just I want to be a respected member of the community. Like there's a little bit of I want to be looked up to, like I'm important and all those sorts of things. That's a different type of respect. Like I don't know. It seems that was the one part where I was like, dude, Boba, you've lived as a bounty hunter. Like that's, I mean, in the real world, it's a bit more legitimate profession, but like in Star Wars, it seems very scummy, very rough and tumble. You hung out in Jabba's palace. You should know that is not how this works. You shouldn't just show up and be like, I'm in charge, you should respect me. Like, I mean, maybe there's stuff in the flashback we've missed. He's done things. But like, I have a feeling a lot of it's going to have to go now. So like, all right, I'm done being nice. I'm going to fuck you up now. And then you're gonna give me my cut.
Now, I thought that too when I first saw it. First, I had to kind of scratch that because while I was thinking that, I was thinking like, man, this is, you know, he has a different kind of angle. But then I started telling myself, well, actually, I don't know how he moves. I just know what I've seen in the movies, and therefore, it might be something else. And another thing that made me think that it might be more to it and more of a strategy is kind of with the flashbacks and other things he was going through, like with the long game. Like, because even when she was telling him, like, you know, when Fennec was like telling him, like, you know, I don't think it's a good idea, you should get rid of them. It's kind of like he followed her when he thought it made sense, but when it had something to do with his plan for the long game, he had different reasoning, and it kind of panned out. Like him saving those Fomorians when he said to save them, like she was like, you know, I think it's a bad idea, but then they kind of came through for him later on. And it just made me feel like he's more of a strategist, more so than I would have gave him credit for. Because when I thought he was just like a straight up bounty hunter, you know, usually you would think they'd be kind of like straight line, you know, it's just like you're in my way or you're part of the situation or whatever. And then also with the flashbacks, when you saw how when he was trying to escape and then he was going to try to help the guy out too. And then the situation where the young Tusken kid had him up there, you know, digging for water, and how he could have overtook that kid the whole time, but didn't. He kind of played it differently.
So even when he tried to escape the first time, because the kid was there and he took the kid's stick, and he could have just, you know, kicked the dog and, you know, bang the kid, but kid's not a threat. Kid hasn't done shit to him. Like, I think they're showing that Boba has an internal code, which like, if we're going to relate to him, it's not going to be his heart of gold, but it's going to be his honor code that people will be able to attach themselves to, because he seems like he is honorable. And I think to the Gamorrean guards, he can see that, because the reason he spared them while they're like, no, you should kill these fuckers, they're from the old team. But he's like, I'm sorry, they didn't betray Jabba after he died. They stayed loyal. They then went with Bib Fortuna and stayed loyal with him. I'm sensing a trend.
Right.
I think these guys will be loyal to me.
Right.
And he makes it clear. It's like, if I spare you guys, are you going to swear fealty to me? And they're like, fuck yeah. And he's like, all right, cool. And it pays off, as we see.
Right.
And that's the right type of thinking.
Yeah.
Right.
I thought it was interesting because he definitely have a different style than Jabba for sure. And then even when they went to town and they wanted to have him on that litter, where they just walking him in on a throne, he's like, that's not. But then also, I thought he was kind of trying to get the more of the respecting and more personable side, because he probably don't have as big as army as Jabba. Like Jabba could really make a threat and really follow through. And since it's just kind of like, him and his number one, how much fear can you give them? And if you do, and if it's ever tested, how can you ever back it up? So I think he's trying to come at it at a different angle, because really in the situation, would he really be able to handle it if he didn't have more loyalty and respect than he did fear? Because really, even that situation in the when they were leaving and they got attacked, it's kind of like he could have got overpowered there, and then if they didn't come back to get him, then he would have been in trouble. So I thought it was just very interesting. Like I said, his long game, but
to the long game, this is the interesting thing, because in part because I was subjected to Disney movies as a way to entertain my kid. But we haven't seen his I Want song, right? Disney movies, the character's always like, I want this. And it's usually like, that's not going to make you happy, which is the whole point of the movie. It's like, this is what you need. But sure, that's your I Want song. Right. And we haven't seen that. Normally, I think in a more classically structured narrative with we're going to have not just this one episode of flashbacks. It's clearly going to be recurring.
Right.
That's what's going to tell us what his I Want is. And it's probably not going to be till like 2/3 of the way through the season where we're going to get to some conversation where he externalizes his I Want. Fennec probably knows it, because she's probably the person he's going to have that conversation with. And that's going to be his long game. And then it will explain a bunch of the choices that he's made through the season in the current time up to the big, last third of the season.
I know when I first saw this episode, I was kind of tripping about how simple it was. I don't know what I was expecting. I was expecting more, but when I thought about it, I'm like, this is the good way to unpack him, because really, do we know him? Not really. And I thought the moments of him being, in the chamber, regenerating, from him having his flashbacks, him, even within his flashbacks, him being taken hostage, even though all those are like quiet moments where the environment told his story. They told how he thought about things, how he strategized, his morals and stuff like that. So I liked how the story unpacked who he was versus somebody just saying, hey, that's him and he does this and this is what he's about and blah, blah, blah.
Right.
But like you said, Disney-fied, where it's all his answers in the song. It kind of let the story tell. So even though the story was simple, it let you know how he dealt with certain kind of things. Even with him destroying that sand monster and letting the little kid take the credit.
Right.
And knowing what that meant.
Pretty much I liked how, like, yes, the kid took the credit and everyone was like, yay! But it's like the people, the chief of the Tusken Raiders, like, yeah, I know what happened. You fucking killed the thing.
Right. And that's the only one that really matters, how he sees it. And then he offered him the water, which is an ally.
Right.
You know what I mean? Because he could have, if that just
like, chain this fool back up.
Right. Basically, that said, if I could take out that monster, I could take out this kid and I could have been on my way. But I walked back with the kid. So that's saying alliance, a possible alliance. That says respect. Yeah. That he could use and cash in that favor, that respect card later on. That was dope.
The visual storytelling that they did, where he doesn't talk a lot in the flashbacks, was done really well. They're able to externalize a lot of what's going on. They make his choices very clear, and that's credit to Robert Rodriguez. the director. I was like, oh, Mr. Desperado.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
that tracks. I'm sure he
Yeah.
was like, let me get in on this Star Wars stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, I really liked, I don't want to say the quietness or the silence, but the lack of talking when he's out in the desert in the flashbacks. Like the fact that they're able to convey so much about his choices. Like he does talk occasionally, but a lot of it, like you can figure it out from context what they're showing on the screen. So it'll be interesting, like the whole sort of his time with the Tusken Raiders, because they also haven't been explored very much at all, at least in the new continuity. I think there was some legacy stories. I think there were some legacy stories where like a Jedi actually, like, I don't know which timeline as far as like how far back, but like straight up joined the Tusken Raiders and like went native, as it were, and had a son grow up inside that culture. And then, you know, they basically like defended the Tusken Raiders from, I forget, it was like, I don't know, people that wanted to kick them out of the desert or some shit like that, but they haven't really been explored. So I like the fact that they added more detail, they added more variation. So their adornments on sort of their head and face coverings weren't the standard. They were slightly different. They had variations within the tribe. Hell, the tents were different from the ones that we saw in Attack of the Clones when Anakin went on a murder rampage. So that'll be an interesting thing to see them explore along with, you know, sort of Boba Fett's journey. But the funny thing is like the episode was fine.
Okay.
Was it great?
Yeah.
Because we don't, there's not enough meat there. There's not enough, like, I mean, this is partly just a very stoic, shut off emotional character. So we don't have enough emotional meat to really like have a like, I mean, the fight stuff, that the ambush that they had was okay. I feel like combat has to be absurdly good for me to be like, ooh, yeah, that was cool, right? But they're setting things up. Like this is, I feel like sometimes people put too much on the first episode. Like it has to be its own mini movie, and there's nothing that turned me off. There's nothing that turned me off.
I enjoyed it as well, man. I think Robert Rodriguez did a great job directing. You know, he does his thing. Jon Favreau, his writing was on point. Like I said, I thought it was a simple story, but when I thought about all the work it had to do for a first episode, I think it did a lot, considering we always want the big, you know, splash page of action and all this different kind of things, but I think that's coming.
Yeah.
I'm curious to see how they're going to differentiate this from The Mandalorian, because it's almost kind of like in the same pool in a way, even though it is a different character. I'm just interested to see how they're gonna, you have to make it different in a way where you don't obviously know you're watching the same show, even though it technically would be.
Right. Well, I think Dave Filoni, who I'm sure is also heavily involved, did a really good job setting up the Mandalorians through the Clone Wars TV show and Rebels again, of what they are, and it's so different from who Boba Fett is. And then in Mandalorian, even Mando is sort of an offset of the Mandalorians that are like, no, we're so serious, we never take off our masks, right, we never take off our helmets. And then when they run into Boba Fett, they're like, fuck you, you are not a Mandalorian. Like you haven't done the rites, you don't follow the code, like you're just out here wearing our stuff and it's upsetting to us. And he's just like, I don't fucking care. So at least on that level, like even within the Mando show, they already like, yeah, Boba Fett, you're over there. And he's clearly going to be having a crime mob boss story as opposed to Mando's, at least it was lone wolf and cub. I assume the child is going to stay off and somewhere else. So we'll see what new status quo Mando comes back in with. But yeah, I really, it's so funny. I think I saw some people bitching online that because there's this one shot where they're sort of like, here's Mos Espa, and that's basically where the pod races took place.
Okay.
Since I ran a Star Wars tabletop campaign role-playing game on Tatooine for a little while, I have that fucking map in my head because they were on that planet for like a while. But you don't, again, that's one of the corners on the page that George Lucas never showed us.
Yeah.
Like, we just like, hey, Mos Eisley is a scum bucket of a smuggler haven. Does that mean it's the only city? Well, no. Like, is it a town? Is it a city? I mean, the fact that we see that shot of Mos Espa and it's like, wow, that is a city. That is a city in the desert. And it's like, yeah, we're sketching in all these other places. So I don't know if people are getting pissed off about that. There was someone else is like, can we have a story that's not on Tatooine? And I was like, I don't care. Like, yeah. Then you got to go and establish a whole other planet. And it's like, nope, we're just going to expand this area of detail over on Tatooine, and we're going to tell our story there because people love Tatooine and Jabba and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, all right, fine, cool. Really interesting to see also just how complex they get into with the underworld there, because that is going to be interesting. That isn't really something, certainly not in the new continuity that they've dealt with. In the old continuity, you get protagonists running into basically like other smugglers with a heart of gold type situation, and you sometimes deal with Hutts, but it's always from the outside. Yeah. Right? It's never a character living, breathing that world and all those connections. Mm-hmm. So, I don't know. It might turn out to be a really interesting sort of mob boss story, but we got to see, again, what Boba Fett's I want is. Does he want to be a mob boss, or is this part of some other plan? Is this a stepping stone?
Right.
I don't know. It's going to be very weird because, like, again, he watches his dad get killed by a fucking Jedi. He's part of the clone program. And then he goes off and becomes a legit monstrous bounty hunter. Has clearly some downtime in Tatooine with the Tusken Raiders. And I'm guessing that's going to be quite a while. But it's like, what does this guy want now? Like, I feel like when characters get to a certain age in whatever their continuity is, they should be thinking about fucking retiring. Like, right. Boba Fett's not young. Like, in continuity, he is not young. Like, I would love if even in the sequels, they just had a version of Luke, Leia, and Han done tons of shit, but they're like, nah, we're fucking retired. Like, we're gonna send you help, but like, my bones creak. I'm sorry, I can't jump on the battlefield with you. Like, let them be mentors. So I don't know, it's like one of the things like I ask now of older badass characters, like, why are you not retired? Why are you not thinking, like, what is Boba Fett's end game? Right?
So from the original movies, did you think he was older? Or is he older because the actor's older now and now they're doing something with the story?
No, like in continuity, it tracks that he is old. So.
Okay, I didn't know that. I was curious about that.
Yeah,
okay.
Because it was the Clone Wars? The start of the Clone Wars, he's like 12 or something like that, 10 or 12, right? That's when his dad dies. Then there's, I don't know, 3-4 year jump to Return of the Jedi. That's when the twins are born. So he's like 15, 16. So then there's a, I don't know, 18 to 20 year jump to New Hope, which is Luke and Leia. And then he shows up in Empire. So he's like maybe mid 30s to early 40s. You know, my age, and I'm feeling it. At the end of like Return of the Jedi or something like that. And this is some vague amount of time afterwards. Yeah. We don't know.
Right.
But like, and I think the actor is maybe older than the character a little bit,
Yeah.
which, oh God, I forgot his name. I saw him decades ago in some like New Zealand film, and fuck, that guy's got the chops. He's got the goddamn chops.
He's also Aquaman's dad.
Yeah, he's Aquaman's dad. Like, no, I think he's a great actor, and I think, like, I want to see his stoicism break.
Yeah.
Right? Like, he definitely has the range to be more than just stoic and gruff.
Right.
So that'll be really interesting to see. But yeah, we'll see where they go with it. I don't even have any predictions. Like, I think he's gonna have to put his fucking foot down on some people's necks. Like, that is just required for him to be in charge of an underworld organization. There's no, like, I just get by on respect. It's like, no, you're gonna have to, like, go into people's casinos and put your throat, or not your throat on their neck. Your foot on their throat.
Yeah.
Like, because that ambush that happened, they knew he was there.
Right.
Was it because someone else was watching him go to this place and set up the ambush, or because the person that runs that casino was like, fucking hit this fool on the way out? Right? Because, like, even I was like, so they did the whole thing with like, hey, do you want us to clean up your helmets? I would have been, thank you, but no.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because this is my armor. I don't know. He was like, sure, okay, we're doing their customs the way they do things, but that's a safety thing. So they fill up their helmets, which means when they walk out, they're not going to have their helmets on.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that is either one of two things. That is either a very shrewd, strategic decision on the part of that casino owner, or it's the writers and directors being like, for this scene, we want the actors' helmets off so we can see their faces. Right? This is always the thing I notice now with like sci-fi stuff with helmets is like,
gotta get that helmet
we either
off
need to
that
give
head.
an excuse all the time to have the helmets off, or you come up with these weird face coverings that also have lights inside so you can see their faces through the glass at all times, even though it would blind them.
Or you do the badass thing and do like Judge Dredd, like the last one, and kept his helmet on the whole time. That's was the right thing to do.
That is freaking commitment. I mean, they did it in Mando. They did it in Mando for like 95% of like his screen time.
They did more of him with his helmet on than I thought they would, but that's probably because the actor the character was probably bigger than the actor in a way. You know what I mean? Like it's more iconic than the actor. But you know, as people get popular and things like that, then that helmet has to come off. There gotta be something going on with it malfunctioning or catches on fire,
or you're carrying it
on the screen,
carrying a bunch of coins in it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So, yeah, I think it's very interesting. I'm excited to see what happens with it next. Just because of the way The Mandalorian went, I know this story could start off a certain kind of way and become something else. And like you said, you made a great point about the want, and that will dictate where it's going to go. And like I said, the way The Mandalorian went, I would never have thought all that stuff would have went down the way it did and how it did.
Right.
And I'm wondering too, since he has like more of a connection with the Star Wars we know, does that mean he's going to be bumping into characters that we know or more familiar with as well? So that's going to be interesting to see too. And also, do we want them pulled into this?
Well, this is sort of that complaint of why does everything fucking happen on Tatooine? And it's like you have a giant galaxy. Like, how do these people keep bumping into each other? And at least if you got someone using the Force, like there's an excuse, like, oh, I sensed something. I have to go over there and fly down to this, whatever. But I would guess, at least for the first season, they're going to try and hold off on, let's have another tie-in and another tie-in, because they have whole spin-off shows now, right? Ahsoka's going to get her whole show and Thrawn's going to show up there. And like, so I don't know if they want to clutter their playing field, because they just might want to introduce the local threats and bosses that Boba Fett's going to have to deal with. And I mean, the other thing is we're going to be interested to see what they do with Finnick, like, because you don't waste Win like as a side character, like.
Right.
Man, I saw this meme that she pulled the fucking Disney hat trick because she's a princess and agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. and a Star Wars character.
That's right. That's Mulan. That's Agent May.
Mm-hmm. Fucking
That's
Calvary.
That's Chung-Li from the Street Fighter movie.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
So I think the show's got a lot of potential. We'll have to see how the other episodes go, though.
Yeah. Like I said, I didn't think it was bad. So would you recommend it to Star Wars enthusiasts?
They're already watching it.
Folks,
they're already watching it. Like, come on.
That's true. I'm
gonna give it like 3 or 4 episodes, probably.
Yeah, for sure.
Right, and then I'll be like, eh.
One thing I wanted to mention about this episode that I thought was kind of funny when I was watching it, I was thinking like, it's so funny when Star Trek tried to do a movie, it tried to be grand and epic like Star Wars. So that's what they went to try to figure out their movie, and it didn't quite work out, right? It took them a while to really figure it out.
Yeah.
Or do it in a smooth enough way where you don't see how they're trying to do it, and they're just they figured out their way. But I think they were shooting for that, and just it's a whole other kind of movie. One's like a space opera, another one's a whole different kind of perspective on the future. So I thought it was funny watching this, especially when it came to the Sand Beast, and I was like, this is straight up a Star Trek episode. Even the music even sounded like it when he was fighting him with the chain around his neck and choking him out. I could have swear I heard that.
I would not be surprised if Robert Rodriguez was like, "Look, we're gonna do a on the nose homage here."
It was kind of this. It kind of had that music, and it kind of had that vibe to it. And I thought it was just kind of funny.
Yeah, and it was funny too because like the CG for that creature was really good, but it also felt like stop motion.
Yes.
Like somehow in my head, like when it first came up and it's like, oh, it's got 4 arms. Yeah. But when it came down and used sort of the middle arms as front legs to like move like a centaur, it felt very stop motion-y. It didn't look bad, but just somehow in my brain, I was just like old school Harryhausen.
Yeah. And also what's that movie called Galaxy Quest?
Oh yeah.
It kind of reminded me of that. And it was kind of doing the same thing where it's kind of playing with it, but so that whole thing with you in the desert fighting a monster and but it made me laugh, kind of like, this seems very familiar in a way. And I thought it was pretty funny how things just kind of borrow from each other, how things just a full circle.
Oh yeah.
Like I said, Star Trek trying to figure out his way as a movie, and it was trying to figure it out, and just how Star Wars is doing their thing as a TV show, and how it's kind of borrowing from Star Trek. And it's just funny how that circle of life.
Great steal.
That's right. All right. Well, that was my conversation with Ryan, and we're talking about the new show on Disney Plus, The Book of Boba Fett, Chapter 1, and this was the episode Stranger in a Strange Land. All right, so that was fun catching up with you and chatting about it, and I'm looking forward to talking with you on the next episode.
Yeah, no, it should be fun. I'm curious to see what the next title is going to be. Stranger in a Strange Land. Like,
what'd you think of that title?
So, I mean, it's a book title. Like, it's a very famous book. That's a Robert Heinlein book, and it's about basically, they send some astronauts to Mars, and they kind of lose contact with them, and then they send some follow-up astronauts to Mars, and it turns out that most of the other astronauts died, but one of them had a kid, and the kid was raised by the Martians, like underground, unbeknownst to anyone else. And then they're like, all right, cool, why don't you come with us? And they come back to Earth, and it's sort of his experience as a stranger in a strange land. This inspired so much other stuff, and for its day it was wild and outlandish, right? And very, very progressive. So if you read in that sense, like, oh okay, for the 60s America, this is almost transgressive, like it's almost too far. So it was like the title was like Stranger in a Strange Land. What that doesn't track, but I mean, it worked. Like, I don't think they were trying to make that connection, but it is sort of, he's the outsider.
Yeah, and he's kind of getting raised by the I guess since he's, and captured by the Tuscans. I don't know how long he stays with them, but maybe they dictate how he kind of moves.
It's going to be interesting to see, because the Tuscan Raiders, yes, they are raiders, but they're basically sort of displaced. They're almost kind of like the Fremen in a way, right? The desert is theirs. They raid when they don't have enough to survive. So they can be seen as very underdog-esque. Like, so there could be a part of him where he's like, oh, maybe that's part of his want, is that he's gaining control of the underworld so he can get the underworld to stop fucking with the Tuscan Raiders. Boom! There's my prediction.
Okay. All right. You pulled it. We'll see. I dig it. All right, man. Damn. That was good.
I mean, it tracks, right?
Yeah.
Like, because he does have, you can see him as having a lot of respect for their resilience as a fellow survivor, right? They haven't shown necessarily him any dishonor, right? He has not shown them any dishonor. He's shown restraint, right? So there can be a lot of mutual respect there, and depending on how far that goes, he might go somewhat Dances with Wolves and be like, all right, so I can go native, or I can go back into the world and then from the world try to give you space to exist.
Right.
I just have to become underworld boss. I mean, that would be interesting. That would be an interesting angle.
Yeah, we shall see, my friend. We shall see. All right. Well, it's good catching up with you, Ryan.
Until next time.
Hey, this is Jay, and I hope you're enjoying the conversation so far. I just want to let you know that this conversation is part of a larger conversation that continues on the next episode. Thanks for listening. Hey, it's Jay. If you enjoyed my conversation with Ryan, please check out our episodes where we talked about the Book of BOBA FETT, Spider-Man No Way Home, and the movie Batman. Thanks for listening, and until next time, peace.